When his maid didn't show up, the Mafia boss went himself and saw the truth. The evening shadows stretched across the hallway as Luca De Luca stood before Evelyn's apartment door. His jaw clenched tight. His expensive suit felt confining as tension rippled through his muscles. Something was wrong. Evelyn had never missed a day of work, not in the 3 years she'd been his housekeeper. In his world, patterns meant survival. Breaking them meant trouble. His knuckles rapped against the door. The hollow sound echoed through the empty corridor. No answer. He knocked again, harder this time, and the door creaked open slightly. It wasn't locked. Luca's hand instinctively moved to the gun holstered beneath his jacket. He pushed the door wider, scanning the dimly lit apartment. The setting sun cast long shadows across the worn carpet, illuminating overturned furniture and shattered glass. Then he saw her. "Before you continue listening, please let me know where in the world are you watching from today?" Now back to the story. Evelyn lay crumpled on the floor like a broken doll, her dark hair fanned out around her head. Bruises marked her pale skin, fresh ones, angry and purple against her throat and face. Her uniform was torn, and blood had dried at the corner of her mouth. "Fuck," Luca growled, crossing the room in 3 long strides. He knelt beside her, his fingers finding her pulse. It was there, steady, but weak. Relief flooded through him, quickly replaced by a familiar, cold rage. Someone had dared to touch what was his. Even if she was just his maid, she was under his protection. This was an insult he couldn't ignore. Gently, he slid one arm under her knees and another behind her shoulders. She felt small in his arms, fragile in a way that made his chest tighten uncomfortably. As he lifted her, she made a soft sound of pain that had him gritting his teeth. "I've got you," he murmured, though she couldn't hear him. Her head lolled against his chest as he carried her from the apartment. His driver was waiting with the car, face carefully blank as Luca emerged with Evelyn's unconscious form. "Hospital, boss?" "No." Luca's voice was ice. "The mansion. Call Dr. Romano. Tell him to be there in 20 minutes. The drive was silent, except for Evelyn's shallow breathing. Luca held her close, studying her face in the passing streetlights. He'd never really looked at her before. She was just the quiet woman who kept his house in order, always professional, always in the background. Now, even bruised and unconscious, there was something striking about her features that he couldn't ignore. When they reached his mansion, Luca carried her up the grand staircase to his own bedroom. The sheets were pristine white, making the blood on her skin seem even starker as he laid her down. His hands came away red, and he stared at them for a moment, feeling the rage build again. "Mr. De Luca." Dr. Romano's voice came from the doorway. The old doctor moved quickly to Evelyn's side, medical bag in hand. "What happened?" "Find out," Luca ordered, moving to stand by the window. From there, he could watch both Evelyn and the grounds below. "Fix her." The doctor worked methodically, checking vitals, cleaning wounds, documenting injuries. Luca remained still, a dark sentinel, his mind already calculating revenge. Whoever had done this would pay. Slowly. Painfully. A small moan from the bed drew his attention. Evelyn stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Something in Luca's chest shifted, an unfamiliar sensation that made him uncomfortable. He was used to feeling nothing, to being the cold, calculating boss who ruled through fear and power. But watching her lie there, vulnerable and hurt, stirred something he thought he'd buried long ago. Something that made him question the walls of ice he'd built around his heart. Pain shot through Evelyn's body as consciousness crept back. Her eyelids felt heavy, and the soft silk sheets beneath her fingers felt foreign. This wasn't her bed. This wasn't her apartment. Panic surged through her as she forced her eyes open. The room swam into focus. Ornate wallpaper, crystal chandelier, antique furniture that probably cost more than she made in a year. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she tried to push herself up, but agony ripped through her side, making her gasp. "Don't move." The deep voice froze her in place. Luca DeLuca stood in the doorway, his broad shoulders filling the frame. His usual pristine suit was wrinkled, tie loose around his neck. Dark stubble shadowed his jaw, and his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, studied her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. "Where am I?" Her voice came out raspy, her throat raw. He crossed the room in long strides, picking up a crystal glass from the bedside table. "My home, here." He held the water to her lips, his other hand supporting the back of her head. Despite her instinct to refuse, thirst won out. She drank deeply, trying to ignore how gentle his touch was. "I found you in your apartment," he said, his voice rough but not unkind. "You were unconscious, beaten." His jaw clenched. "The doctor treated your injuries. You're safe now." Evelyn's memories came flooding back. Mark's anger, his fists, the shattering glass. She wrapped her arms around herself, wincing at the pain. "I need to go." "No." One word, but it carried the weight of an empire behind it. "Mr. DeLuca." "Luca," he corrected, setting the glass down with controlled precision. "And you're staying here until I'm certain you're recovered and safe." "I don't need your protection," Evelyn insisted, even as her body trembled. "I can take care of myself." A dark laugh escaped him. Clearly, his eyes traveled over her injuries, making her feel exposed. "The bruises on your neck suggest otherwise." Anger flared through her pain. "You don't own me. I'm just your maid." "You're under my employment, which means you're under my protection." He leaned closer, his presence overwhelming. "That boyfriend of yours made a grave mistake touching what's mine." The possessive tone in his voice sent a shiver down her spine. Mark is being dealt with." The casual way he said it terrified her. She knew what Luca DeLuca was capable of, had heard the whispered stories from other staff members. "Please," she whispered, "just let me go home." "This discussion is over." He straightened, adjusting his cuffs. "You'll eat, rest, and recover. Here." Hours later, dinner was served in tense silence. Evelyn sat propped against pillows, picking at the gourmet meal while Luca watched from an armchair across the room. His presence was suffocating, yet somehow reassuring, a contradiction that unsettled her. "You need to sleep," he finally said, his voice cutting through the quiet. "I'm fine." That wasn't a suggestion. He moved to the chaise lounge near her bed, settling into it with lethal grace. "I'll be here." "I don't need a babysitter," she protested, but exhaustion was already pulling at her. He didn't respond, just watched her from the shadows as the room grew darker. The pain medication began to take hold, making her eyelids heavy. As she drifted off, she caught a glimpse of his face in the dim light. Something had changed in his expression, a crack in that impenetrable armor he always wore, a flash of something almost human as his eyes lingered on her bruises. Then darkness claimed her, leaving her with the unsettling knowledge that she was now caught in Luca DeLuca's world, whether she wanted to be or not. The morning sun filtered through the heavy curtains, casting long shadows across the luxurious bedroom. Evelyn sat rigid against the headboard, staring at the elaborate breakfast spread on the silver tray before her. Fresh pastries, fruits, and a steaming omelet filled the air with tempting aromas. but she pushed it away. Luca stood at the foot of the bed, his shoulders tense beneath his tailored suit. "Eat." "I'm not hungry." She lifted her chin, despite the way her stomach cramped with emptiness. "You haven't eaten since yesterday." His voice held that edge of authority she'd heard him use with his men. "The doctor said you need to regain your strength. I don't need you to take care of me." Evelyn's fingers twisted in the silk sheets. "I'm not some charity case for you to fix." Luca's jaw clenched. He moved closer, his presence filling the room like a gathering storm. "This isn't about charity. You're under my protection now." "Your protection?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "I never asked for it. I'm just your maid, remember? A maid who showed up at my door 3 months ago with perfect references and impeccable skills." His dark eyes narrowed. Too perfect, perhaps. Heat crept up her neck. "What are you implying?" "Eat the damn food, Evelyn." He pushed the tray closer. "Stop acting so proud." Something snapped inside her. "Proud? You think this is about pride?" She shoved the tray away, sending a glass of orange juice tipping. Luca caught it before it could spill. "You don't know anything about me or my life." "Then enlighten me." His voice dropped dangerously low. "Tell me why you're so determined to refuse help when you clearly need it." Evelyn's hands shook. The weight of her secrets pressed against her chest, threatening to suffocate her. "Because I've spent my entire life running from men like you. Men who think they can control everything and everyone around them." "Men like me?" His eyebrow arched. "You don't know what kind of man I am." "Oh, but I do." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "I grew up watching men like you destroy everything they touched. My brother—" She caught herself, but it was too late. Luca went very still. "Your brother?" The tension in the room thickened. Evelyn closed her eyes, knowing she couldn't take it back now. When she opened them again, Luca was watching her with predatory focus. "Who are you, really?" he demanded. Her heart pounded against her ribs. The carefully constructed lies of the past 3 months crumbled around her. "My name isn't just Evelyn." She met his gaze steadily. "It's Evelyn Rossi. Dominic Rossi is my brother." The silence that followed was deafening. Luca's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Recognition, disbelief, and something darker. The name Rossi hung between them like a loaded gun. She watched as understanding dawned on his face. All this time, he'd been harboring the sister of his greatest enemy. The woman he'd protected, whose wounds he'd tended to, was the heir to the rival family that had been trying to destroy his empire for years. Luca's hands gripped the footboard, his knuckles white. The dangerous man who'd shown her unexpected kindness now looked at her like she was both a revelation and a threat. In that moment, their carefully constructed dynamic shattered, replaced by something far more complicated and dangerous. Luca's footsteps echoed against the marble floors as he paced the length of the bedroom. His fingers flexed, betraying the tension coursing through his body. "Tell me everything." Evelyn wrapped her arms around herself, her bruises aching with the movement. "What's there to tell? I'm sure you know all about the Rossi family." "I want to hear it from you." His voice was dangerously soft. "Why did you come here? To spy on me?" A bitter laugh escaped her. "Spy on you? I came here to clean your house, nothing more." She met his intense gaze. "I wanted the most boring, normal job I could find. Something far away from blood money and power plays." Luca stopped pacing, studying her face for any sign of deception. "You expect me to believe Dominic Rossi's sister chose to become a maid?" "I chose freedom," Evelyn snapped. "Do you know what it's like growing up in that world? Watching your brother turn into someone you don't recognize? Her voice cracked. The violence, the constant fear, I couldn't take it anymore. Something shifted in Luca's expression. He moved closer, his presence both threatening and oddly comforting. And your ex-boyfriend? The one who did this to you? Just another mistake. Evelyn touched her bruised cheek. I thought dating someone normal would help me escape. Turns out normal men can be just as cruel as made men. Luca's jaw clenched. He won't touch you again. Don't. Evelyn held up her hand. I don't need another powerful man making promises. This isn't a promise, Evelyn. It's a fact. He sat on the edge of the bed, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne. But you need to understand something. Now that I know who you are, you can't just walk away. Fear flickered in her chest. What does that mean? It means you're valuable. His eyes locked with hers. Your brother would burn this city to the ground to get you back, which means you need protection. My protection. I won't be a pawn in your war with my brother. No, Luca agreed, surprising her. You'll be under my care. There's a difference. The gentleness in his tone made her heart skip. She watched as he stood, moving to the window where morning light cast shadows across his sharp features. Despite everything, she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward him. Your brother and I have been enemies for years, Luca continued, but right now my priority is keeping you safe. Why? Evelyn whispered. Why would you protect me when I lied to you? Luca turned, his expression unreadable. Because you ran from that life for a reason, and because... He paused, something vulnerable flashing in his eyes before disappearing. Because you're mine now. My employee, my responsibility. The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it sent warmth spreading through her chest. She watched as he took out his phone, barking orders to increase security around the mansion. His men arrived shortly after, filing into the room with military precision. Luca commanded them with natural authority, outlining new protection protocols. But Evelyn noticed something else. The way his gaze kept finding her, checking on her, making sure she was comfortable with each decision. The dangerous man who'd discovered her identity was showing her a different side of himself. Not softer, exactly, but more human. When he spoke about her safety, his voice carried a weight that went beyond duty or strategy. Evelyn found herself studying him, noticing details she'd overlooked before. The way his shoulders carried the burden of his empire. The subtle gentleness in his hands when he gestured. The flash of concern in his eyes when one of his men mentioned a potential threat. Chemistry crackled between them, undeniable despite their complicated situation. Every time their eyes met, the air seemed to thicken. She wondered if he felt it too. This dangerous attraction building between captor and captive, protector and protected. The setting sun cast long shadows through the mansion's windows as Evelyn smoothed down her borrowed dress. Her bruises had faded to a dull ache, but her pride remained as strong as ever. She watched Luca adjust his tie in the hallway mirror, his movements precise and controlled. You should be resting, he said without turning around. I've rested enough. Evelyn straightened a stack of papers on the nearby console table. I'm not made of glass. Luca's reflection caught her eye. No, you're made of something much stronger. His voice carried a hint of admiration that made her chest tighten. The sound of cars arriving outside broke their moment. Luca's underbosses would be expecting the usual efficient service, and Evelyn refused to hide upstairs like some invalid. She moved toward the kitchen, feeling his eyes follow her. Evelyn. His tone was a warning. I'm just going to help Maria with the refreshments. She kept walking, her chin lifted. "Unless you're planning to order me not to?" A low chuckle escaped him. "Would you listen if I did?" You know the answer to that. As the meeting began in Luca's study, Evelyn helped serve drinks and light refreshments. Each time she entered the room, she felt Luca's gaze track her movements. Even when deep in conversation about territory disputes and profit margins, he seemed hyper-aware of her presence. The underbosses noticed, too. She caught their questioning glances, the way they studied the dynamic between their boss and his supposed maid. One of them, an older man with silver hair, watched her with particular interest until Luca's sharp glare made him look away. Throughout the evening, their paths crossed in doorways and hallways. Each time, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. When Evelyn reached past him for an empty glass, his breath caught. When Luca moved behind her to access a cabinet, his hand brushed her lower back, sending electricity through her spine. The meeting dragged on for hours, business conducted in hushed tones and meaningful silences. Evelyn kept busy, but she couldn't ignore how natural it felt to move through Luca's world, how his presence both unsettled and steadied her. Finally, the last car pulled away into the night. Evelyn found Luca in the kitchen, his tie loosened, jacket discarded. He stood at the counter, attempting to assemble a simple sandwich. "Let me help," she said, moving beside him. "You've done enough tonight." But he didn't stop her when she reached for the bread knife. They worked in comfortable silence, the kitchen's warm lighting creating an intimate atmosphere. Luca's sleeves were rolled up, revealing strong forearms marked with subtle scars. Evelyn tried not to stare, but her eyes kept drifting to his hands, remembering how they felt carrying her to safety days ago. "Your underbosses have questions," she said, slicing tomatoes. "Let them question." His shoulder brushed hers as he reached for the salt. "What happens in my house is my business." "Is that what I am? Your business?" Before he could answer, they both reached for the same knife. Their fingers touched, and the world stopped spinning. Electricity surged between them, making Evelyn's breath catch. She looked up to find Luca's eyes dark with desire, his face inches from hers. For a moment, neither moved. The kitchen filled with the sound of their breathing, the air heavy with possibility. Luca's gaze dropped to her lips, and Evelyn felt herself lean closer. Then, like a spell breaking, Luca pulled away. He gripped the counter edge, his knuckles white. "You should get some rest," he said roughly. "It's been a long day." But even as he created distance between them, the desire remained palpable. It hung in the air like smoke, impossible to ignore and harder to forget. The grandfather clock's steady ticks echoed through the study as Evelyn curled deeper into the leather armchair, losing herself in the pages of an old book she'd found on Luca's shelves. The warm lamplight created a cozy bubble around her, a temporary escape from the dangerous world beyond these walls. Her fingers traced the worn spine, savoring the peaceful moment. The study door opened with a soft click. Evelyn didn't need to look up to know it was Luca. His presence filled any room he entered, like a storm rolling in from the horizon. His footsteps were heavy, weighed down by whatever darkness his day had brought. When she finally glanced up, she found him watching her, his tie loosened and jacket discarded. Shadows played across his face, highlighting the tension in his jaw. There was something different about him tonight, a crack in his usually impenetrable armor. "You should be sleeping," he said, his voice rough with exhaustion. "So should you." Evelyn marked her page and set the book aside. "Rough day?" Luca moved closer, and Evelyn's heart picked up its pace. He stopped before her chair, close enough that she could smell his expensive cologne, mixed with something darker, whiskey maybe. His eyes searched her face, softening at the edges. "Every day in this life is rough," he murmured, "but some things make it bearable." A strand of hair had fallen across Evelyn's face, and before she could brush it away, Luca's hand was there. His touch was surprisingly gentle as he tucked the hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her skin. The tenderness of the gesture stole her breath. Time seemed to slow, trapped in the amber of this moment. Evelyn knew she should pull away, maintain the careful distance they'd been dancing around, but her body betrayed her, leaning into his touch like a flower seeking sunlight. Luca's eyes darkened, and his hand slid to cup her cheek. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, his thumb brushing across her bottom lip. Evelyn's heart thundered in her chest. She should tell him to stop. She should remember who he was, what he was. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she found herself rising from the chair, drawn into his orbit like gravity itself demanded it. His other hand found her waist, pulling her closer. The heat of his body seeped through her thin dress, making her dizzy with want. Luca's breath fanned across her face as he leaned in, giving her one last chance to retreat. She didn't take it. Their lips met in a kiss that started soft but quickly blazed into something fierce and desperate. Luca kissed like a man starving, his grip tightening on her waist as if afraid she'd disappear. Evelyn's hands found his chest, feeling his heart racing beneath her palms. The kiss deepened, and Evelyn tasted the whiskey on his tongue, felt the barely contained violence in his touch. This was dangerous. More dangerous than anything she'd faced before. Because this wasn't just desire. This was surrender to something that could destroy them both. That thought sent a jolt of reality through her system. Evelyn broke the kiss, pushing against his chest. They stood there, both breathing heavily, still wrapped in each other's arms. "This can't happen again," she managed to say, her voice shakier than she'd like. Luca's lips curved into that dangerous smirk she'd come to know well. His grip on her waist tightened possessively, sending shivers down her spine. "Don't make promises you can't keep." The morning sun filtered through the mansion's tall windows as Marco Santoro's sleek black car pulled into the circular driveway. Luca watched from his study, his jaw tightening imperceptibly as his best friend and right-hand man emerged from the vehicle. Something felt different today. The air seemed charged with an unfamiliar tension. Evelyn was arranging fresh flowers in the foyer, her movements graceful despite her healing injuries. When Marco entered, his footsteps faltered for just a moment. His dark eyes lingered on her figure longer than necessary, drinking in every detail of her presence. "Marco?" Luca called out, his voice carrying a subtle warning that few would notice. "In my study?" But Marco took his time, approaching Evelyn first. "It's been a while," he said softly, his charm on full display. "I didn't expect to find you here, of all places." Evelyn's hands trembled slightly as she adjusted a lily. "Mr. Santoro?" she replied formally, keeping her eyes down. Luca watched the exchange from the doorway, noting how Evelyn's shoulders tensed, how she seemed to make herself smaller. His fingers drummed against the doorframe, a quiet rhythm of growing irritation. "The meeting, Marco," Luca reminded him, his tone leaving no room for argument. In the study, Marco settled into his usual chair, but his usual easy demeanor was replaced with something more restless. As they discussed territory disputes and protection payments, his attention kept drifting to the door, as if hoping Evelyn would walk past. "The Gambinos are pushing their luck on the east side," Marco was saying, but Luca barely heard him. He was too focused on the way Marco's eyes lit up when Evelyn entered with their coffee. The way his friend's body language shifted entirely in her presence. "Thank you, Bella," Marco said, his voice honey smooth. The familiar endearment made Luca's blood simmer. Evelyn practically fled the room, her cheeks flushed. The moment the door closed behind her, the tension between the two men crystallized. "You're distracted today," Luca observed, his words carefully measured. Marco's smile didn't quite reach his eyes. "Just surprised to see her here. Last I heard, she'd left the life completely. She's under my protection now." "Your protection?" Marco's laugh held a bitter edge. "Is that what we're calling it?" Luca set his coffee down with deliberate slowness. "Choose your next words carefully, old friend. I'm just saying, I know her. Better than you might think." Marco leaned back, a challenge in his posture. "She's not meant for this life. She ran from it once already." The meeting concluded shortly after, neither man quite meeting the other's eyes. As Marco's car disappeared down the driveway, Luca found Evelyn in the kitchen, her hands gripping the counter's edge. "How long?" he demanded without preamble. Evelyn didn't pretend not to understand. 2 years ago. It lasted 6 months. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because it doesn't matter anymore." She finally turned to face him, her chin lifted defiantly. "It ended because I wanted out of this life, all of it. The violence, the secrets, the constant looking over your shoulder." Luca stepped closer, crowding her against the counter. "And now?" "Now." Evelyn's laugh was shaky. "Now I'm right back where I started, aren't I? Trapped in a world I tried to escape, with men who think they can own me." The words stung more than Luca wanted to admit. His hands gripped the counter on either side of her, caging her in. "Is that what you think this is? Ownership? Isn't it?" Her eyes searched his face. "You keep me here, protected in your golden cage. How is that different from what I ran from?" Jealousy churned in Luca's gut, not just at the thought of her with Marco, but at the idea that she might run again, that she might choose freedom over whatever this thing between them was becoming. For the first time in years, he felt his legendary control slipping through his fingers like sand. The study crackled with tension as Luca's men filed in one by one. Their faces were grim, shoulders squared for battle. Luca stood by the window, his reflection hard and unforgiving in the glass. Behind him, a manila envelope lay open on his mahogany desk, its contents spelling trouble in black and white. Evelyn lingered in the doorway, caught between wanting to know and fearing what she might learn. Her brother's name had echoed through the halls earlier, carried on hushed whispers and worried glances. She knew that sound, the quiet before the storm. "Close the door," Luca commanded, not turning around. His voice was steel wrapped in silk. As his underbosses took their seats, their eyes flickered between Luca and Evelyn. She felt the weight of their assessment, the sister of their enemy, now under their boss's protection. Some nodded respectfully, others barely concealed their suspicion. "Dominic Rossi," Luca began, finally facing the room, "is moving weapons through our territory. He's building an arsenal." His fingers traced the edge of his desk, deceptively casual. "He thinks we won't notice. He thinks we're blind." Evelyn's heart clenched. This was the brother she knew. Always pushing, always testing boundaries. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to make herself smaller against the wall. One of the older capos cleared his throat. "We could send a message, something permanent." "No." Luca's response was immediate, his eyes darting to Evelyn before returning to his men. "We watch, we wait. When he makes his move, we'll be ready." The meeting continued, strategies forming like battle lines on a map. Evelyn listened as they discussed surveillance points, guard rotations, contingency plans. Each word was another weight on her shoulders. These men, her brother's enemies, were now her protectors. "Double the guards at the warehouse," Luca ordered. "And I want eyes on every Rossi lieutenant. If they so much as sneeze, I want to know about it." The men nodded, their loyalty to Luca evident in every movement. But there was something else in their expressions when they looked at him. Concern, perhaps. Their boss was different now, changed by the woman who stood silently in their midst. As the meeting progressed, Evelyn caught fragments of her brother's plans: weapons stockpiles in abandoned buildings, secret meetings with rival families. Each detail was another crack in her heart. The brother who had once protected her was now the threat they were planning against. One by one, the men filed out, their missions clear. Luca remained by his desk, his presence filling the room like smoke. His eyes met Evelyn's, and for a moment the mask slipped. She saw the conflict there, the need to protect his family warring with his desire to protect her. He moved to leave, his steps measured and controlled. At the doorway, he paused, looking back at her. The air between them hummed with unspoken words. She wasn't just his maid anymore, or even just his enemy's sister. She had become something else entirely, something that made the most powerful man in the city hesitate. Their gazes held, a silent conversation in the growing shadows. Luca's hand tightened on the doorframe, his knuckles white with restraint. The moment stretched, heavy with possibilities neither of them was ready to name. The evening shadows stretched across Luca's study as Evelyn paced, her fingers trailing along the spines of leather-bound books. The mansion felt smaller lately, every corner haunted by his presence. Even now, alone, she could feel the ghost of his touch from their earlier encounter in the hallway. A brief brush of shoulders that sent electricity through her body. She pulled a random book from the shelf, needing something to occupy her hands. The weight of it anchored her, but couldn't steady her racing thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. The way he commanded a room, the gentleness in his touch when he checked her healing bruises, the fire in his eyes when he looked at her. "Still hiding in my study?" His voice made her jump. The book tumbled from her hands, hitting the floor with a dull thud. Luca stood in the doorway, his suit jacket discarded, sleeves rolled up to reveal inked forearms. He looked dangerous and beautiful, like a predator at rest. "I'm not hiding," Evelyn said, bending to retrieve the book. "I'm reading. The book's upside down." His smirk was infuriating. She slammed it back onto the shelf. "Fine, I'm avoiding you. And how's that working out?" He stepped closer, and the air grew thicker. Perfectly well until now. She backed away, bumping into his desk. "Don't." "Don't what?" Another step closer. "Don't notice how you watch me when you think I'm not looking? Don't feel the way you tremble when I'm near?" "Stop it." Her voice shook. "This isn't a game." "No," he agreed. "It's not." His hands came to rest on the desk on either side of her, caging her in. "Games I can walk away from." Evelyn pushed against his chest, but he didn't budge. "You're just like all the rest, thinking you can control me, own me." "I'm nothing like them." His words were sharp, angry. "I protect what's mine. I'm not yours." She shoved harder this time. "I'm not some prize to be won in your war with my brother." Luca's eyes darkened. "Is that what you think this is? A power play? Isn't it?" She lifted her chin, defiant. "The great Luca de Luca keeping his enemy's sister as a pet?" His hand shot out, gripping her jaw. Not rough enough to hurt, but firm enough to hold her in place. "You think I want this? That I plan to feel this way about you? Let go of me." But she didn't fight his grip. "You're running," he accused. Not from me, from what you feel. You don't know what I feel. Don't I? His thumb brushed her lower lip. Your pulse is racing. Your pupils are dilated. You lean into my touch even as you tell me to stop. She jerked away from him, ducking under his arm. You're delusional. In 2 strides, he caught her, spinning her around and pinning her against the wall. His body pressed against hers, hard muscle and barely contained power. Am I? Then why haven't you left? The door's right there. I'm not stopping you. Because, she faltered, lost in the intensity of his gaze. Because you want this as much as I do. His voice dropped lower, rougher. Because every time you run, something pulls you back. I hate you, she whispered, but there was no conviction in it. No, he said, his face inches from hers. You hate that you want me. You hate that I see through your walls. You hate that I make you feel safe when I'm the last person who should. His words hit too close to home. She tried to push him away again, but he caught her wrists, pinning them above her head. You're mine now, Evelyn, he growled, his lips nearly brushing hers. Like it or not. The warehouse meeting was supposed to be routine. Evelyn stood behind Luca's right shoulder, where he'd insisted she stay. The air reeked of fish and salt from the nearby docks, making her nose wrinkle. 5 of Luca's men flanked them, while the rival gang, the Martinellis, stood across the empty space, their own soldiers positioned strategically. Luca's voice carried across the warehouse, smooth and controlled. The terms are fair. You get the docks on weekends, we maintain weekday control. Something felt off. Evelyn noticed it in the way the rival gang members kept shifting, their eyes darting to the rafters. Before she could warn Luca, the first shot rang out. Get down! Luca roared, shoving her behind a stack of crates as chaos erupted. Gunfire exploded from above. Hidden snipers. This wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. Evelyn's heart hammered against her ribs as bullets splintered wood around her. Luca's men returned fire, their shots precise and deadly. Through gaps in the crates, she watched Luca move like a predator, each shot finding its mark with terrifying accuracy. A rough hand grabbed her hair from behind. She screamed as she was yanked backward, a cold gun barrel pressing against her temple. Drop your weapons, DeLuca. The voice belonged to Marco Martinelli, the rival boss. Or your pretty little pet dies first. The warehouse fell silent. Luca turned slowly, his expression transforming from controlled power to something darker, something that made Evelyn's blood run cold. 3 seconds to let her go. Luca's voice was deadly quiet. 1. You don't make demands here. Martinelli tightened his grip. 2. Evelyn caught Luca's eye. In that split second, she understood. She went limp, dropping her weight suddenly. The unexpected move made Martinelli stumble. 3. 2 shots rang out simultaneously. Blood sprayed across Evelyn's face as Martinelli collapsed behind her. Luca's bullet had found its mark between his eyes, while one of his men had taken out the last sniper. But Luca wasn't finished. He stalked toward the remaining Martinelli soldiers who had surrendered, his rage radiating off him in waves. You touched what's mine. What happened next would haunt Evelyn's dreams. Luca's violence was precise, calculated, and absolutely merciless. He didn't just kill them, he sent a message. Each death was a statement of power, a warning to anyone who would dare challenge him or threaten what he considered his. Evelyn couldn't look away. This was the man she'd been fighting her attraction to. Beautiful and terrifying in his brutality. His suit was splattered with blood, his knuckles raw, but his face remained eerily calm throughout the carnage. When it was over, he crossed to her in 3 long strides, his hands surprisingly gentle as they checked her for injuries. Are you hurt? She shook her head, unable to find her voice. "Get her out of here," he ordered one of his men. "Take her home, now." The drive back to his mansion passed in a blur. Evelyn's hands wouldn't stop shaking, but she couldn't tell if it was from fear or adrenaline. The image of Luca's controlled fury kept replaying in her mind, the way he'd transformed from businessman to killer in seconds, all because someone had threatened her. At the mansion, Luca arrived shortly after. His clothes changed, but his energy still crackling with danger. He found her in the study, pacing. "You don't leave this house without my permission," he ordered. His voice brook no argument. "Not until I've dealt with the rest of their organization." Evelyn nodded, surprising herself with her compliance. But she'd seen what happened to those who crossed him. More than that, she'd seen what lengths he'd go to protect what he considered his. She watched him stride away, his shoulders rigid with controlled violence, and felt something shift inside her. The man who'd just saved her life was the same one who could end it. And somehow, that made him even more dangerous to her heart than to her life. The study was quiet, except for the crackling fireplace and the gentle clink of ice in Luca's glass. After the warehouse bloodbath, tension hung thick in the air. Evelyn sat in the leather armchair across from him, watching the flames dance across his sharp features. "My father died when I was 17, Luca said suddenly, his voice low and rough. He swirled the amber liquid in his glass, eyes fixed on the fire. "Shot in the back by someone he trusted, someone who ate at our table who called him brother?" Evelyn's breath caught. She'd never seen him like this, vulnerable, almost human. "I found him." Luca's knuckles whitened around the glass. "In his study, not unlike this one. Blood everywhere. The family was in chaos. Everyone expected me to break, to run, to fail." A bitter smile curved his lips. "I killed his murderer that same night. Tracked him down and put 3 bullets in his chest. That's when they started calling me Il Mostro, the monster." He stood, moving to the window. Rain pelted against the glass, matching the stormy expression on his face. "I was too young to run an empire, but weakness meant death, so I learned. Quick." He turned to look at her, shadows dancing across his face. "Do you know what it's like, making life and death decisions before you're old enough to drink?" Evelyn thought of her own brother Dominic, and how the family business had changed him. "Yes," she whispered. "I do." Luca's eyes softened for a moment. "Of course you do." He returned to his chair, closer to her now. "Every friend became a potential enemy. Every lover, a possible weakness. Trust." He laughed darkly. "Trust is a luxury I couldn't afford." "Is that why you're alone?" Evelyn asked softly. "I'm alone because it's safer." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "You saw what happened today. One moment of vulnerability, one person they can use against you." His voice trailed off, and she knew he was thinking about how they'd held a gun to her head. "Your father," she prompted gently, wanting to understand more. "Antonio de Luca." Pride and pain mixed in his voice. "He was respected, feared, but he was also loved. He taught me everything, how to shoot, how to lead, how to command loyalty, but he never taught me how to be alone." Luca's voice cracked slightly. "The silence in this house after he died, it was deafening." Evelyn found herself moving closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his words. "And your mother?" "Cancer, when I was 12. His jaw clenched. "All the money, all the power, couldn't save her. That's when I learned that some things can't be controlled, no matter how hard you try." The confession hung between them, heavy with unspoken meaning. Luca rarely showed weakness, yet here he was, sharing his deepest wounds. "Sometimes," he continued, voice barely above a whisper, I wonder if he'd be proud or horrified at what I've become, the things I've done to keep this empire alive. Evelyn reached out, her hand hovering near his but not quite touching. You survived. At what cost? His dark eyes met hers, filled with a pain she'd never seen before. Every death adds another weight. Every betrayal builds another wall. Until one day... He stood abruptly, the vulnerability vanishing like smoke. His expression hardened, the mask of Il Mostro sliding back into place. This world doesn't have room for weakness, he muttered, walking away from her, leaving Evelyn alone with the weight of his confession and the growing realization that she was falling for both the monster and the man beneath. Thunder rolled outside as Evelyn stormed into Luca's office, her heart pounding. He looked up from his desk, surprise flickering across his face before settling into his usual mask of control. "What am I to you?" she demanded, hands trembling at her sides. "Another piece in your collection? Another thing to control?" Luca's jaw tightened. He rose slowly from his chair, his movements deliberate. "You know it's not that simple." "Then make it simple," she challenged, taking a step closer. "Because I'm tired of these games, Luca. The way you look at me when you think I'm not watching. The way you touch me like I'm something precious, then push me away like I'm poison." His eyes darkened. "Evelyn." "No," she cut him off. "I want the truth, all of it. What am I to you?" Luca moved around the desk, his presence filling the room. "You want the truth?" His voice was low, dangerous. "The truth is I've been fighting this since the moment I found you in that apartment, fighting the way you make me feel, the things you make me want." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. "Do you have any idea what it does to me, seeing you here every day, knowing you're Dominic's sister, knowing that wanting you could start a war?" "I never asked for any of this," Evelyn shot back. "I never wanted to be part of this world again." "And yet, here you are." He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body. "Here we are." "Tell me," she whispered, her defiance crumbling under the intensity of his gaze. "Tell me what you want." Luca's hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. "I want you," he admitted roughly. "God help me, but I want you. Every smile, every challenge, every moment of defiance. I want it all." Her breath caught in her throat. "Then why fight it?" "Because wanting you is dangerous," he growled. "Because every time I look at you I feel myself losing control, and control is everything in my world." "Maybe," she breathed, "some things are worth losing control for." Something snapped in Luca's eyes. He pulled her against him, one hand tangling in her hair while the other wrapped around her waist. His lips crashed into hers, hungry and demanding. This wasn't like their first kiss, tentative and testing. This was raw need, months of tension finally breaking. Evelyn melted into him, her hands gripping his shoulders as he backed her against the wall. His kiss was possessive, claiming, marking her as his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Luca pressed his forehead against hers. "You're mine now," he said, his voice rough with desire. "Part of my world, whether you like it or not. There's no going back from this." Evelyn looked up at him, seeing both the monster and the man, knowing she was falling for both. Her heart raced as she realized the truth of his words. There was no turning back now. The morning started with explosions. Luca jolted awake to the sound of his phone buzzing frantically. 3 of his warehouses had been hit simultaneously. As he processed the information, his jaw clenched tight enough to crack teeth. Beside him, Evelyn stirred, her eyes opening with concern. "What's wrong?" she asked, noting the tension in his shoulders. "Your brother," Luca growled, already pulling on his suit jacket. He's made his move. The bedroom door burst open as Marco rushed in, his face grim. "Boss, we've lost contact with the docks. Rossi's men are everywhere." Luca's world transformed in an instant. The tender man who'd held Evelyn through the night vanished, replaced by the cold-blooded Mafia boss. His dark eyes hardened as he barked orders into his phone, coordinating his response to the attacks. "Get the cars ready," he commanded Marco, "and double the security here. No one gets within a mile of this house." Evelyn watched as chaos erupted around her. Guards rushed through the halls, weapons visible beneath their jackets. The mansion, usually a picture of controlled power, now hummed with nervous energy. "Dominic wouldn't hurt me," she said, but uncertainty crept into her voice. Luca turned to her, his expression fierce. "Your brother would burn the world to get what he wants, including you." He grabbed her shoulders, his grip firm but not painful. "You stay here. You don't leave this house for any reason, understand?" Before she could argue, gunfire erupted outside. Luca's men shouted, and the sound of screeching tires filled the air. He cursed, pushing Evelyn behind him as he drew his weapon. "They're testing our defenses," Marco reported, peering through the window. "Small team, probably scouts." Luca's phone buzzed again. More bad news. Another warehouse hit, this time with casualties. His empire was under attack, and for the first time in years, he felt the ground shifting beneath his feet. "Get me Giovanni," he ordered one of his men. "Tell him to activate Protocol Red. Anyone loyal to Rossi gets taken out. Tonight." Evelyn gasped at the coldness in his voice. This was the side of Luca she'd tried to ignore, the ruthless killer who'd built his empire on blood and fear. "Luca, please, there has to be another way." "There isn't." His voice was final, brooking no argument. "Your brother wants a war? I'll give him one he won't survive." The day unfolded in a blur of violence and strategy. Luca coordinated his forces from his office, while Evelyn paced the mansion like a caged animal. Reports kept coming in. More attacks, more losses. Dominic was hitting them hard and fast, trying to destabilize Luca's operation before launching his main assault. By evening, the tension had reached a breaking point. Evelyn watched as Luca's carefully controlled facade began to crack. His orders became sharper, his movements more agitated. The weight of protecting both his empire and her was taking its toll. "You should have left me at my apartment," she said quietly, standing in his office doorway. "None of this would be happening if—" "Don't," Luca cut her off, his voice dangerous. "Don't you dare say that." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, backing her against the wall. "You think I regret finding you? Protecting you?" Evelyn met his intense gaze, fear and desire warring in her chest. "I think I'm making you weak, giving Dominic leverage he wouldn't have had otherwise." His laugh was harsh. "Weak? You think caring about you makes me weak?" His hand came up to cup her face, surprisingly gentle despite his fierce expression. "You make me stronger. You give me something worth fighting for beyond territory and power." But as another explosion rocked the city in the distance, Evelyn felt her resolve wavering. She pulled away from his touch, wrapping her arms around herself. "At what cost, Luca? How many people have to die because of us?" She saw the frustration flash across his face, the struggle between the man who wanted her and the boss who couldn't show weakness. He grabbed her arm as she turned to leave, his grip possessive, but not cruel. "You're mine now, Evelyn," he warned, his voice low and intense. "Don't forget that." The mansion's security cameras flickered to life, showing Marco's car pulling up to the gates. Something felt off. Luca watched the feed from his office, his fingers drumming against the mahogany desk. Marco wasn't scheduled to return until tomorrow. "Let him through," Luca ordered into his radio. but unease settled in his gut. Evelyn stood by the window, watching the approaching vehicle. "Something's wrong," she whispered, and Luca noticed how her hands trembled slightly. The car stopped, and Marco stepped out with 3 unfamiliar men. Before Luca could react, gunfire erupted. His loyal guards dropped one by one, taken by surprise by the betrayal. Marco had brought Rossi's men right to their doorstep. "Get to the panic room," Luca ordered Evelyn, his voice deadly calm despite the chaos. He reached for his weapon, but she grabbed his arm. "Don't leave me," she pleaded, her eyes wide with fear. "Go." He pushed her towards the hidden passage behind his bookshelf. "Antonio will—" The office door burst open. Antonio, his most trusted guard, lay dead in the hallway. Marco stood there, gun raised, with 2 of Rossi's men flanking him. "Sorry, old friend." Marco's smile was cold. "But Dominic made me a better offer." Luca's world narrowed to a single point of fury. "You betray me for money?" His voice carried the promise of death. "Not just money." Marco's eyes shifted to Evelyn. "She was mine first, remember?" Everything happened at once. Luca lunged for his gun, but Marco's men were faster. A shot rang out, catching Luca in the shoulder. He stumbled, and in that moment of weakness, they grabbed Evelyn. She fought like a wildcat, kicking and screaming. "Luca!" Blood soaked through his expensive shirt as he struggled to stand. Marco's men held him back while their leader approached Evelyn with a syringe. "Just something to keep you quiet, beautiful," Marco whispered, plunging the needle into her neck despite her struggles. "I'll kill you," Luca's voice was ice, even as he watched Evelyn's eyes grow heavy. "I'll tear you apart piece by piece." Marco laughed. "You can try, but first you need to survive the night." He nodded to his men. "Make it look good, but leave him breathing. Dominic wants him to suffer." The beating that followed was brutal. Through swollen eyes, Luca watched helplessly as they carried an unconscious Evelyn away. His world spun, not from the pain of his injuries, but from the agony of failing her. When his men finally found him, the mansion was eerily quiet. The betrayal had cut deep into his organization. Marco had taken more than just Evelyn. He'd shattered the trust Luca had built his empire on. "Find her," he ordered through bloody lips, refusing medical attention. "Find her now!" His remaining loyal soldiers scrambled to obey. Reports flooded in. Marco's betrayal ran deeper than anyone suspected. He'd compromised security protocols, disabled tracking systems, and cleared escape routes. Luca stood in his destroyed office, ignoring the pain that racked his body. The image of Evelyn's terrified face as they took her haunted him. He'd promised to protect her, and he'd failed. "Boss," one of his men approached cautiously. "We found their trail. They're heading to the old warehouse district." Something dark and primal awakened in Luca. The calculated businessman vanished, replaced by something far more dangerous. He checked his weapon, his movements mechanical despite his injuries. "Get every available man," he commanded. "I don't care what it takes. We're getting her back." The night stretched before him, full of promise and violence. He'd lost control, lost his carefully maintained grip on power, all because he'd allowed himself to care, to love. But as he stepped into the night, revenge burning in his veins, Luca realized he didn't regret a single moment with her. She was his, and he would tear apart anyone who dared to take her from him. The warehouse district loomed ahead, a maze of abandoned buildings and broken dreams. Luca's black SUV cut through the darkness, his knuckles white against the steering wheel. Blood from his earlier wounds had dried on his expensive suit, but he felt nothing except the burning need to reach her. "Boss, we've confirmed Evelyn's location," his lieutenant spoke from the passenger seat. "Third warehouse from the east, heavy guard presence." Luca's jaw clenched. "How many?" At least 20 men. Marcos brought in extra muscle. The SUV screeched to a halt. Behind them, 3 more vehicles carried his most loyal soldiers. These were the men who'd stuck with him through the betrayal, the ones he trusted to help him burn this place to the ground. "No mercy," Luca ordered, checking his weapons. "Anyone who stands between me and her dies." The first shot came from a rooftop sniper. Luca's men responded with precise firepower, years of training evident in their coordination. The night erupted in gunfire and chaos. Luca moved like a force of nature, each shot finding its mark. His shoulder wound screamed in protest, but he pushed through the pain. 2 of Rossi's men rushed him. The first caught a bullet between the eyes. The second managed to get close enough for Luca to see the fear in his eyes, before meeting the same fate. "Clear the perimeter," Luca shouted, advancing toward the warehouse. Glass shattered overhead as his men engaged enemies on multiple levels. Inside, the warehouse was a labyrinth of shipping containers and old machinery, perfect for an ambush. Luca's instincts, honed by years in this brutal world, kept him alive as bullets whizzed past. A familiar voice echoed through the space. "You should have stayed down, Luca." Marco's taunting carried over the gunfire. Rage surged through Luca's veins. He spotted movement to his left and fired without hesitation. A body dropped, but it wasn't Marco. "You were never worthy of her," Marco continued. "She deserves someone who can protect her." "Like you." Luca's voice was deadly calm as he advanced. "A rat who betrays his friends for money?" More of Rossi's men appeared, but Luca's fury made him unstoppable. Each shot, each movement brought him closer to Evelyn. Bodies littered his path, testament to his determination. Then he heard her scream. The sound cut through him like a knife. Following her voice, Luca burst through a door into what looked like an old office space. Marco stood there, using Evelyn as a shield, gun pressed to her temple. "Stop right there," Marco warned. Luca took in the scene. Evelyn's face was tear-stained but defiant. Even now, she showed more strength than fear. Their eyes met, and something passed between them. Trust, understanding, love. "You're pathetic, Marco," Luca's voice dripped with contempt. "Using a woman as shield? Is that what you've become?" "Shut up," Marco's hand shook slightly. "I loved her first. She was mine before you took her." "I was never yours," Evelyn spat, struggling against his grip. Luca saw his opening when Marco's attention wavered for a split second. The shot was perfect, clean through Marco's shoulder, causing him to release Evelyn and drop his weapon. She didn't hesitate. The moment she was free, Evelyn drove her elbow into Marco's wounded shoulder and ran toward Luca. Marco reached for his fallen gun, but Luca was faster. 2 more shots rang out, and Marco collapsed, clutching his legs. Luca pulled Evelyn behind him, shielding her with his body as he approached his former friend. Marco looked up at him, fear finally replacing his arrogance. "Please," he begged. "We were like brothers. Brothers don't betray each other." Luca's voice was ice. He raised his gun one final time. "Luca." Evelyn's soft voice stopped him. She touched his arm gently. "You're bleeding." The world narrowed to just her presence. Luca turned, taking in her face, her eyes, the fact that she was safe. His hand shook as he touched her cheek. "Nothing else matters," he whispered fiercely. "Nothing but you. I'll protect you until my last breath, Evelyn. No one will ever hurt you again." The warehouse fell silent, save for Marco's labored breathing and the distant sound of sirens. Blood pooled beneath him, where he lay on the concrete floor, his legs useless from Luca's precise shots. Evelyn stood behind Luca, her hand still resting gently on his arm, while his gun remained trained on his former best friend. 20 years, Luca's voice was eerily calm. 20 years of friendship, Marco. We grew up together, fought together. I trusted you with everything." Marco's laugh was bitter, tinged with pain. "Everything except her." His eyes flickered to Evelyn. "You never could share what mattered most, could you, Luca?" The warehouse lights cast harsh shadows across Luca's face as he stepped closer to Marco. "This isn't about Evelyn. This is about loyalty." "Loyalty?" Marco spat blood onto the floor. "You talk about loyalty while you parade around with the enemy's sister? The great Luca de Luca, brought low by a pretty face." Evelyn tensed behind Luca, but remained silent. This wasn't her battle to fight. "I gave you everything," Luca continued, his control slipping slightly. "Power, position, respect. You were my brother in everything but blood." "I was your shadow," Marco's voice echoed through the empty space. "Always second best, always following your lead. And then she comes along." He gestured toward Evelyn with his chin. "And suddenly you're willing to risk everything we built? For what? Love?" Luca's finger tightened on the trigger. "You sold information to Rossi. You put my entire organization at risk. How many of our men died because of your jealousy?" "Your men," Marco corrected, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "They were always your men, just like she was always going to be yours." He shifted, wincing at the movement. "You want to know something funny, Luca? She never looked at me the way she looks at you. Even before, when we were together. I was just a placeholder." Evelyn stepped forward then, her voice steady despite the tension. "You're pathetic, Marco. This isn't about me, and you know it. You betrayed him because you couldn't stand being second." Marco's eyes darkened. "You don't know anything about me, sweetheart. About us. About what we've been through." "I know enough," she replied. "I know you're not half the man he is." Luca watched the exchange, his face impassive but his mind racing. Years of friendship, of trust, of shared secrets and spilled blood, all of it poisoned by betrayal. The weight of what needed to be done pressed down on him like a physical thing. "The Rosses are moving against the Eastern Territory," Marco said suddenly, his voice taking on a desperate edge. "I can tell you when, where. Let me make it right, brother." "Don't call me that," Luca's words cut like steel. "You lost that right when you turned on me." "Because of her?" Marco's desperation turned to anger. "She'll destroy everything you've built, Luca. She's Rossi blood, it's what they do." Luca moved with lightning speed, pressing the barrel of his gun under Marco's chin. "Choose your next words carefully. They might be your last." The silence stretched between them, heavy with years of friendship turning to ash. Marco's eyes, once bright with loyalty and brotherhood, now held nothing but bitter resentment. "Kill me then," he whispered. "Prove me right. Show her exactly what kind of monster you are." Evelyn watched as Luca stood frozen, the gun steady under Marco's chin. She could see the struggle in his rigid posture, the way his free hand clenched at his side. This was the price of loving him, watching as he navigated a world built on violence and betrayal, where mercy was weakness and trust was a luxury few could afford. "You're already dead to me," Luca said finally, lowering his weapon. "The brother I knew died the moment you betrayed us." Marco's laugh was hollow. "Us? There is no us, Luca. There's only power and those too weak to take it. I chose power." The words hung in the air like poison, marking the final death of their friendship. 2 decades of trust and loyalty, shattered beyond repair. The morning sun cast long shadows through Luca's office windows as he stared at the blood-stained note in his hands. His knuckles turned white as he gripped the paper, reading the message again. "Family should stay with family. She belongs with us, not with you. Clock's ticking, De Luca." The words were written in red. Not ink, but blood. Alongside it lay a torn piece of fabric from Evelyn's favorite dress, also stained crimson. Dominic Rossi's signature move, sending pieces of what he planned to destroy. Luca's jaw clenched as he looked across his desk at Antonio, his most trusted captain. "How did this get past our security?" "They found ways around our perimeter," Antonio replied, his expression grim. "Rossi's men are getting bolder. They're testing our defenses, looking for weak spots." "And Evelyn?" "Safe in her room, boss. Double guard on her door, just like you ordered." Luca stood, walking to the window. Below, his men patrolled the grounds of his estate, armed and alert. But it wasn't enough. Dominic had made that clear with his message. The door opened, and Evelyn walked in, her face pale but determined. "I heard about the note." Luca turned, his expression softening slightly at the sight of her. She wore a simple black dress, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. Even now, with danger closing in, she carried herself with quiet strength. "You shouldn't be here," he said, but there was no real force behind his words. "He's my brother, Luca." Evelyn moved closer, her eyes fixed on the bloody note. "I know how he thinks, how he operates. This isn't your fight. It became my fight the moment he threatened what's mine." She met his gaze steadily. "You're mine now, just as much as I'm yours." Antonio shifted uncomfortably, but Luca held up a hand before he could speak. "Leave us." Once they were alone, Luca crossed the room to Evelyn, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. "Your brother won't stop until he has what he wants." "Then we'll have to stop him first." Her voice was steel wrapped in silk. "You can't keep playing defense, Luca. He'll keep coming, keep testing, until he finds a way through." Luca's grip tightened slightly. "You know what you're asking? Going after Dominic means war. Open, bloody war between our families. We're already at war." She reached up, touching his face. "The only difference is, he's the only one fighting to win." The truth of her words hit him hard. He'd been trying to protect her, to keep the violence at arm's length. But Dominic had made that impossible with his message. The blood on that paper wasn't just a threat, it was a promise. Luca moved to his desk, pressing a button on his phone. "Get everyone here, now." Within minutes, his top lieutenants filed into the office. They stood in a semicircle, faces grim, waiting for their orders. These were men who'd killed for him, died for him, built an empire with him. Now he was asking them to risk it all. "Dominic Rossi thinks he can threaten what's mine." Luca's voice filled the room, cold and dangerous. "He thinks he can send messages written in blood and expect me to bow down." He picked up the note, crushing it in his fist. He's about to learn exactly why people fear the DeLuca name. His men straightened, hands moving to their weapons. They knew that tone. It meant blood would flow, and soon. "We're done playing defense," Luca continued, his arm sliding around Evelyn's waist. "From this moment on, we take the fight to him. I want every property, every business, every ally he has under attack. No mercy, no quarter. We end this, once and for all." The room crackled with tension as his men nodded, their faces set with grim determination. They'd followed him into hell before. They'd do it again. Evelyn leaned into him, her voice soft but firm. "Whatever happens, we face it together." Luca looked down at her, seeing not just the woman he loved, but the strength that had drawn him to her from the start. She wasn't asking him to hold back, to be less than what he was. She was asking him to be more, to fight not just with violence, but with everything he had. The night air crackled with tension as Luca's convoy of black SUVs rolled silently through the streets toward Dominic's estate. Inside the lead vehicle, Luca checked his weapons one final time, his movements precise and controlled. The weight of his gun felt familiar in his hands, but tonight was different. Tonight wasn't just about business. It was personal. 3 minutes, Antonio said from the driver's seat, his voice low. Luca nodded, looking at the men in his vehicle. Their faces were hard, focused. They knew what was coming. The radio crackled with updates from the other teams positioned around Dominic's compound. Everything was in place. The estate loomed ahead, a fortress of stone and steel nestled behind high walls. Security lights swept across manicured lawns, and armed guards patrolled the perimeter. Dominic had been expecting this, but even preparation wouldn't save him tonight. "Now," Luca commanded. The night exploded into chaos. Simultaneous explosions rocked the outer walls as Luca's teams breached from multiple points. The security lights went dark as their tech team cut the power, plunging the compound into darkness broken only by muzzle flashes and the orange glow of fires. Luca moved with his team through the breach, his gun already claiming its first victims. Guards fell before they could raise their weapons, but more were coming. The air filled with gunfire and screams as Dominic's men realized they were under attack. "Push forward," Luca shouted, leading his men toward the main house. Bodies littered the ground, some his, more of Dominic's. Blood soaked into the perfectly maintained grass, turning the dew red. A burst of gunfire forced them into cover behind a stone fountain. Water sprayed from bullet holes, creating a crimson mist in the air. Luca signaled to his men, and they responded with precise, coordinated fire. More of Dominic's men fell. Inside the house, the fighting became close and personal. Every room had to be cleared, every corner checked. Luca moved with cold efficiency, his trigger finger steady. He'd done this before, but never with such purpose, such rage burning in his chest. "Boss, second floor clear," came the report through his earpiece. "Basement secure," another voice confirmed. But no Dominic. Where was the bastard hiding? An explosion rocked the east wing, and Luca's radio crackled. "Boss, he's making for the garage." Luca ran, his boots leaving bloody prints on the marble floors. He burst through a side door just in time to see Dominic racing toward a waiting car, surrounded by his personal guards. "Rossi!" Luca's voice boomed across the garage. Dominic turned, his face twisted with hatred. His men opened fire, forcing Luca to dive behind a concrete pillar. The gunfight was deafening in the enclosed space, bullets ricocheting off walls and cars. Luca moved fast, taking down Dominic's guards one by one. His own men joined the fight, and soon only Dominic remained, cornered between two vehicles. "It's over, Dominic," Luca growled, advancing with his gun raised. "You think this changes anything?" Dominic spat blood, his own weapon trained on Luca. "You're still nothing but a pretender, and my sister—" The mention of Evelyn made something snap in Luca's chest. Her face flashed in his mind, her strength, her trust in him. This man, her own brother, had tried to destroy that. Dominic's finger tightened on the trigger, but Luca was faster. His first shot took Dominic in the shoulder, spinning him around. The second hit his knee, dropping him to the ground. The third, aimed straight at his heart, ended it. Dominic Rossi, the man who had threatened everything Luca held dear, lay dead in a growing pool of blood. The garage fell silent except for the distant sounds of gunfire as the last pockets of resistance were eliminated. Luca stood over his fallen enemy, his breathing heavy, adrenaline still coursing through his veins. The victory felt hollow somehow, tainted by the knowledge that this was only the beginning. The power vacuum Dominic's death would create would bring new threats, new enemies. But as he looked down at Dominic's body, Luca knew he would face them all. For her. For them. Whatever the cost. The drive back to his mansion was silent. Blood stained Luca's white shirt, his knuckles still raw from the fight. Every few minutes, his eyes would drift to his phone, where Evelyn's message waited. "Are you okay?" 3 simple words that meant everything. Dawn was breaking when he finally walked through his front door. The mansion felt different now. Warmer, despite the violence that had just transpired. Evelyn stood in the living room, wrapped in one of his sweaters, her dark hair falling loose around her shoulders. When their eyes met, the weight of everything that had happened crashed over him. "You're hurt," she whispered, moving toward him. Luca caught her wrist before she could touch him, his grip gentle but firm. "We need to talk." She nodded, following him to his study. The room still smelled of leather and whiskey, but something had changed. The barriers he'd built around himself were crumbling, and for once, he didn't want to stop it. "Your brother," he started. "I know," she cut him off, her voice steady. "I felt it the moment it happened." Luca moved closer, his hands finding her waist. She didn't pull away. "I won't apologize for what I did. He would have destroyed everything." "Everything?" Her eyes searched his face. "Or just us?" "Both." His thumb traced her cheekbone, coming away wet with tears she hadn't realized she'd shed. "I've built my empire on blood and loyalty, Evelyn. I've taken lives without hesitation. I've destroyed families and crushed anyone who stood in my way." He paused, his dark eyes intense. "But with you, everything changed." She trembled under his touch, but didn't look away. "How?" "Because for the first time, I'm not just protecting my territory or my power. I'm protecting something that matters, something real." His voice dropped lower, rougher. "I love you, Evelyn. It's consuming me, changing me, and I don't want to fight it anymore." The confession hung between them, heavy with implications. Luca continued, his words carrying the weight of truth he'd never shared before. "I know what I'm asking. This life, my life, it's dangerous. There will always be enemies, always be threats. But I swear to you, no one will ever hurt you again. Every breath I take, every move I make, will be to keep you safe." His hands framed her face. "Choose me, Evelyn. Choose us. Let me prove that even in this darkness we can find light together." Tears fell freely now, tracking down her cheeks. "You killed my brother," she whispered. "Yes." He didn't flinch from the truth. "And I'd do it again to protect you. That's who I am, Evelyn. I won't pretend to be anything else." She closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. When she spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I tried so hard not to fall for you. I told myself you were dangerous, that loving you would destroy me." Her eyes opened, meeting his with startling clarity. "But I already love you, Luca. God help me. I love every dark, dangerous part of you." Luca pulled her closer, his forehead resting against hers. Their breaths mingled in the space between them, hearts beating in sync. Her hands clutched at his shirt, not caring about the blood, just needing him closer. "I love you," she repeated, stronger this time. "I choose you, Luca. All of you." He captured her lips with his, pouring every ounce of passion and promise into the kiss. She melted against him, giving as good as she got. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, the world felt different, clearer, certain. They stood there, wrapped in each other's arms, as the morning light filtered through the study windows. The weight of their choices, the magnitude of their love, and the reality of their world settled around them like a heavy cloak. The morning sun filtered through the mansion's windows, casting long shadows across the marble floors. Evelyn stood at the floor-to-ceiling window of Luca's study, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the cool glass. Her reflection showed the toll of recent events, dark circles under her eyes, a pallor to her usually vibrant complexion. Behind her, Luca worked at his desk, the soft scratch of his pen against paper, the only sound breaking the silence. He'd been handling the aftermath of Dominic's fall, restructuring territories and solidifying alliances. But his attention kept drifting to Evelyn, noting how she seemed to fold into herself more with each passing day. "You haven't eaten," he said, his deep voice gentle but firm. Evelyn didn't turn. "I'm not hungry." Luca set down his pen and stood, crossing the room in long strides. He stopped behind her, close enough that she could feel his warmth but not touching. "Talk to me." She pressed her forehead against the glass, closing her eyes. "What is there to say? My brother is dead. My old life is gone. And now—" She trailed off, her breath fogging the window. "And now you're safe," Luca finished, his hands coming to rest on her shoulders. A bitter laugh escaped her. "Safe? In this world?" She turned to face him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. "Yesterday, I watched 2 of your men drag someone into the basement. I heard the screams, Luca. Is that what safety looks like?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "That's business." "It's violence," she countered. "It's death and blood and fear, everything I tried to escape when I left my family." She wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly cold despite the warm morning sun. "I became a maid to have a normal life, to wake up without wondering if someone I love would die that day." Luca's expression softened, a rare vulnerability crossing his features. He reached for her, and this time she didn't resist as he pulled her into his arms. "I know what this life is, Evelyn. I've lived it, breathed it, bled for it. But with you—" He cupped her face, forcing her to meet his gaze. "With you, I want to build something different." "How?" Her voice cracked. "Your world doesn't allow for different." "My world allows for what I say it does." His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. "Yes, there will always be violence, always be enemies, but you don't have to see it, don't have to be part of it." She shook her head. "I already am part of it. The moment I fell in love with you, I became part of everything you are." His arms tightened around her. "Then let me protect you. Let me give you the safety you need while I handle the darkness." "And what happens when the darkness follows you home?" Her fingers curled into his shirt. "What happens when someone decides to hurt you through me again?" "They die." His voice was steel, unwavering. "Anyone who tries to harm you, anyone who even thinks about it, they don't survive. That's not a threat, Evelyn. That's a promise." She studied his face, seeing the absolute conviction in his dark eyes. This was the man she'd fallen for. Dangerous, powerful, but with a heart that beat solely for her. "I don't want to lose myself in this world," she whispered. "You won't." He pressed his forehead to hers. "Because I'll be here to remind you who you are, my light in all this darkness." Evelyn closed her eyes, breathing him in. The scent of his cologne mixed with leather, and something uniquely him filled her senses, grounding her. "Promise me something?" "Anything." "Promise me that no matter what happens, no matter how dark things get, you'll always be honest with me. No secrets, no lies to protect me. I need to know everything if I'm going to survive in this world." Luca pulled back slightly, his gaze intense as he considered her words. Finally, he nodded. "No secrets, no lies. You'll know everything, good and bad." Evelyn watched as Luca commanded his empire from behind his mahogany desk. His shoulders were straight, his presence commanding as he spoke to his underboss about territory realignments. The past few weeks had changed everything, not just their world, but how she fit into it. "The West Side needs tighter control," Luca said, his voice carrying that edge of authority she'd come to know well. "Double the patrols, increase our presence in the neighborhood businesses." Standing by the window, Evelyn studied the papers in her hands. Financial reports she'd been reviewing. Since choosing to stay, she'd refused to be just an ornament in his world. Her business degree, the one she'd earned while trying to escape the Mafia life, was finally being put to use. "These numbers don't add up," she interrupted, approaching Luca's desk. Both men turned to her, but she kept her focus on the documents. "The revenue from the shipping company is off by 20% compared to last quarter." Luca's underboss shifted uncomfortably, but Luca's lips curved into a small smile. "Explain." Evelyn spread the papers across his desk, pointing to specific lines. "Here and here. Either someone's skimming or they're hiding losses. Either way, we need to investigate." "Marco," Luca addressed his underboss, "look into it now." As Marco left, Luca leaned back in his chair, studying Evelyn with those dark eyes that still made her pulse quicken. "You're getting good at this. I grew up in this world, remember?" She perched on the edge of his desk. "I just never wanted to be part of it before." He reached for her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "And now?" "Now." She interlaced their fingers. "Now I understand that running away doesn't solve anything. Better to face it. Head on, make it better where we can." Luca pulled her into his lap, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You make me better," he murmured against her neck. "Stronger. Clearer." "You make me braver," she replied, running her fingers through his hair. "Less afraid of who I am, where I come from." A knock at the door interrupted them. One of Luca's soldiers entered, carrying more reports. Evelyn moved to stand, but Luca kept her firmly in place, his grip possessive yet gentle. "The situation in the South District is handled," the soldier reported. "The local gangs have accepted our terms." "Any resistance?" Luca asked, his business voice back in place. "Nothing we couldn't handle." Evelyn felt Luca's approval in the way his muscles relaxed slightly. "Good. Keep me updated on any changes." After the soldier left, Evelyn turned in Luca's lap to face him. "You're different too, you know. The old Luca would have eliminated those gangs completely." "The old Luca didn't have you to answer to," he said, his expression softening. "Didn't have someone reminding him there are better ways to maintain power than through fear alone." She traced his jaw with her finger. "Is that why you suggested opening the community center in that district?" "Loyalty through respect and opportunity lasts longer than loyalty through fear." He caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "You taught me that." The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the office as they worked together, reviewing reports and making decisions that would shape their territory's future. Evelyn found herself settling into this new role with surprising ease. She was no longer just the maid trying to escape her past, nor was she simply Luca's woman. She was becoming her own force within his world. As evening approached, Luca closed the last file. "Enough work for today," he declared, standing and pulling Evelyn up with him. "I believe I promised you dinner." In the mansion's formal dining room, candlelight flickered across the elegant place settings. It was a stark contrast to the violence and power plays of their daily life, yet it felt right. Evelyn watched as Luca poured them both wine, his movements graceful despite his dangerous nature. "To us," he said, raising his glass, "to building something better together." Evelyn clinked her glass against his. "To facing the darkness side by side." The whispers started small, like ripples in a still pond. Evelyn noticed them first. The sideways glances from some of Luca's men, the hushed conversations that stopped when she entered a room. Something was brewing beneath the surface of their carefully rebuilt empire. "They don't like how much influence you have," Antonio, one of Luca's most trusted captains, warned her one afternoon. "Some of the old guard, they think you're making him soft." Evelyn stood in Luca's study, her fingers tracing the edge of his desk. "And what do you think, Antonio?" "I think they're fools who don't understand that evolution is necessary for survival." He paused, his expression grave. "But they're dangerous fools." The threat materialized 3 days later. Evelyn was reviewing accounts in the library when she heard the commotion. Shouts, the sound of breaking glass, gunfire. Her heart jumped to her throat, but years of growing up in a Mafia family had taught her well. She moved swiftly to the hidden panel behind the bookshelf, the one Luca had shown her, just in case. But before she could reach it, the library door burst open. 3 of Luca's men entered, men she recognized, men who had dined at their table. Their faces were hard, their intentions clear in their drawn weapons. "Nothing personal," one of them said, advancing toward her. "But the boss needs to remember what's important." Evelyn's hand closed around the letter opener on the desk. "And what would that be, Vincent?" "The family, the business, not some woman trying to change things." The door exploded inward with a crash that made them all jump. Luca stood in the doorway, his presence filling the room like a storm cloud. Behind him, loyal soldiers poured in, weapons raised. "Not some woman." Luca's voice was deadly quiet. "My woman, my partner." The fight was brutal but brief. Luca moved with cold efficiency, his actions precise and lethal. But it was the aftermath that truly showed his evolution. Instead of killing the traitors outright, he had them restrained. "You want to see if I've gone soft?" He addressed not just the captured men, but all those gathered. "You think because I choose to build rather than destroy, to create loyalty through more than fear, that I've lost my edge?" He moved to Evelyn's side, his hand finding hers. She squeezed it, feeling the tension thrumming through him. "I could kill you all right now," he continued. "It would be easy, expected even. But that's not the message I want to send." His gaze swept the room. "The world is changing. We either change with it, or we die. Evelyn hasn't made me soft. She's made me smarter, stronger." He turned to the captured traitors. "You'll live, but you'll live knowing that every breath you take is because of my mercy, and her influence. You'll work in our legitimate businesses, under constant watch. You'll help build the new order you tried to destroy." The message was clear. This wasn't weakness, but a different kind of strength. As the traitors were led away, Evelyn watched the faces of Luca's men. She saw understanding dawn in their eyes, saw respect replace doubt. Later, in their private quarters, Luca's carefully maintained control finally cracked. He pulled her into his arms, his embrace almost desperate. "When I heard the gunshots," his voice was rough. "If anything had happened to you." "But it didn't," she soothed, running her hands up his chest. "I'm here. We're here." "I meant what I said," he murmured into her hair. "You make me stronger. The old me would have painted the walls with their blood. But this way." Pulled back to look at her. "This way sends a more powerful message, shows them that change doesn't mean weakness." Evelyn saw it then, the perfect balance he'd found between the ruthless boss he needed to be and the man he wanted to become. He would always be dangerous, always be capable of violence, but now he wielded that power with precision and purpose. The grand ballroom of the DeLuca mansion glittered with crystal chandeliers and old money, Capos, underbosses, and made men from every territory filled the space, their expensive suits and carefully controlled expressions masking their curiosity. This wasn't a regular meeting. Luca had summoned them all, and no one dared refuse. Evelyn stood before the mirror in their bedroom, adjusting the deep burgundy dress that hugged her curves. Her fingers trembled slightly as she fastened her grandmother's pearl necklace, the only piece she'd kept from her old life. "You look beautiful," Luca's voice came from behind her. She met his eyes in the mirror's reflection. He stood there in his perfectly tailored black suit, power radiating from every inch of him. "Are you sure about this?" she asked, turning to face him. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing across her skin. "More sure than I've ever been about anything." They descended the grand staircase together, his hand at the small of her back. The crowd parted before them like waves before a ship. Whispers followed in their wake, some appreciative, others questioning. Evelyn held her head high, remembering everything that had led to this moment. Luca guided her to the raised platform at the front of the room. Crystal glasses clinked as servers distributed champagne. The murmur of conversation died as Luca raised his hand for silence. "Many of you have questioned my decisions lately," he began, his voice carrying effortlessly across the room. "You've wondered if I've lost my edge, if I've forgotten what makes our family strong." His hand found Evelyn's, fingers intertwining with hers. "Look around you. Our territories have expanded. Our legitimate businesses are thriving. Our enemies fear us more than ever. And standing beside me is the woman who helped make it all possible." Evelyn felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. She squeezed Luca's hand, drawing strength from his presence. "Evelyn isn't just my woman," Luca continued, his voice taking on an edge of steel. "She's my partner, my equal. She sits at my right hand not because of who she was born to be, but because of who she chose to become." He turned to face her fully now, his dark eyes intense. "She chose us, chose this family, and in doing so, she made us stronger." One of the older capos stepped forward, his face twisted with barely concealed disdain. "With all due respect, boss, this is unprecedented. A woman, especially a Rossi, having this kind of power." "Unprecedented doesn't mean wrong," Evelyn spoke up, her voice clear and steady. The room fell deadly silent. "I've watched how Luca leads, how he balances tradition with progress, how he knows when to be cruel and when to be merciful." She stepped forward, addressing the crowd directly. "I was born a Rossi, yes. I know what you think that means. But I chose this family. I chose Luca. And every day since then, I've proven my loyalty not with my name, but with my actions." Luca's grip on her hand tightened with pride. "Anyone who questions her place questions me," he declared, "and I think we all know how that ends." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Then, slowly, Antonio, the first to accept her, raised his glass. "To the boss and his lady." One by one, glasses lifted throughout the room. Even the dissenting capo, after a moment's hesitation, raised his in submission. "My loyalty is to this family," Evelyn addressed them all, her voice strong with conviction. "To Luca. Everything I am, everything I have, belongs here now. Anyone who doubts that need only look at what we've built together." Luca pulled her close, his arm wrapping possessively around her waist. "To the future," he declared, raising his glass. "To the future," the room echoed back. As the crowd began to mingle, accepting the new reality of their world, Luca leaned down to whisper in Evelyn's ear. "You never cease to amaze me." She turned in his arms, meeting his gaze. "I learned from the best." The message was clear to everyone in attendance. Evelyn wasn't just Luca's weakness anymore. She was his strength. Together, They were unstoppable. The setting sun painted the mansion's windows in shades of amber and gold. Luca stood at his office window, watching the last rays disappear behind the city skyline. His empire stretched before him. Buildings, businesses, and streets that all bowed to his command. But none of it mattered as much as the woman who now shared his life. Evelyn's reflection appeared in the glass beside his own. She wore a simple black dress that made her look elegant and dangerous all at once. Her hair fell in soft waves around her shoulders, and the diamond necklace he'd given her sparkled at her throat. "Thinking deep thoughts?" she asked, sliding her arm around his waist. He pulled her closer, inhaling the familiar scent of her perfume. "Just appreciating what we've built together." The past months had transformed them both. Luca, once cold and untouchable, had learned to let someone past his walls. Evelyn, who had run from the darkness of their world, had found strength in embracing it, on her own terms. "I never thought I'd be here," she admitted, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. "Standing in this room, by your side, feeling complete." Luca turned to face her fully, his dark eyes intense as they searched hers. "When I found you that day, beaten and broken in your apartment, I knew something had changed. I just didn't know how much." She smiled, remembering how far they'd come. "You were so angry, so protective. I thought you were just another man trying to control me. And now," his voice held a hint of amusement, "now I know you're the only man who ever truly set me free." She reached up to touch his face, tracing the strong line of his jaw. "By accepting all of me, the strength and the weakness, the light and the dark." The city lights began to twinkle outside, creating a backdrop of stars behind them. Luca's empire was quiet tonight, peaceful in a way it hadn't been for months. The wars were over, the betrayals dealt with. They could finally breathe. "I want to show you something," Luca said, leading her to his desk. He pulled out a thick folder and handed it to her. Inside were papers, property deeds, business contracts, bank statements, all of them listing both their names. "What is this?" she asked, though she already knew. "Everything I own is now yours too," he said simply. "Equal partners, remember? In business and in life." Tears pricked at her eyes. Coming from Luca, this wasn't just about money or power. This was trust in its purest form. For a man who had built his empire on control and caution, sharing everything was the ultimate declaration of love. "The mighty Luca de Luca sharing his kingdom," she teased, trying to lighten the moment. "What would your enemies say?" He pulled her into his arms, his touch possessive yet gentle. "They'd say I'm the smartest man in the city, keeping my greatest asset close." "Asset?" She raised an eyebrow. "Partner," he corrected, brushing his lips against her temple. "Equal, queen." The word settled between them, heavy with meaning. Evelyn had never wanted to be anyone's queen, had never sought power or control. But standing here with Luca, she understood that true partnership wasn't about dominance. It was about balance. "Whatever comes next," she said, "we face it together." His hands framed her face, thumbs brushing away the tears she hadn't realized had fallen. "Together," he agreed. "No more running, no more doubt. Just us, building something stronger than either of us could create alone." The night wrapped around them like a velvet cloak, the city below continuing its endless dance of light and shadow. But here, in this moment, none of it mattered. They had found their peace in the most unexpected place, in each other's arms, in the heart of a world that should have destroyed them both. Luca leaned down, his lips meeting hers in a kiss that held all the tenderness and passion of their journey together. It was a promise, sealed in the quiet of their sanctuary, that whatever storms lay ahead, They would weather them side by side. I hope you like this story. Please share what's your favorite part of the story and where in the world you are watching from. Have a wonderful day.